Hey there, Groovesters, Groove Stars. Ridgely here with another Groove Growth Program, Lessons from the CEO. And I am super excited to welcome one of my dearest and oldest friends. We would go way, way back, all the way to Los Angeles, back in the day, the CEO of the Martino Group, Scott Martino. Scott, my brother, so good to see you, man.
Reggie, the pleasure is all mine. Always good to see you. It's great that we can continue to work together. Couple of old dogs still doing new tricks.
Exactly, man. So for the benefit of everybody here, I know you've had a storied career, multiple different versions of being an entrepreneur. Take us back to the beginning. Where did it all start? How did you make that pivot? Did you jump right in from the beginning? Did you go a different path? What did it look like on your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, when you say go way back, if we were going to go way back, you'd have to go back to that first, to that mowing job, at 14, where being the entrepreneur and figuring out how to make some money in the summers was something that was deep inside me, was to figure out not how to have to beg mom and dad for $6, but was to get everybody in the neighborhood to be doing their lawn with us and, be getting $20 a week from everybody. Somehow that was part of my DNA from a very early age, and even before that, mucking stalls at the fairgrounds to make some money. So there's some imprint where you have, and I had, that ability to try and figure out how to make something more than a minimum wage and how to be an entrepreneur. And that led to college, where I knew I wasn't going to be the next Fran Tarkington or Roger Staubach, dating me already. For those of you who know those people, you're old like me. But I knew that I had to become a business person. Could have gone to law school, but didn't want to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to use some entrepreneurial experience. I saw my father, who was in the glass business, and I said, I got to do something like that where you can make money in a lot of different places, not maybe the traditional role. And there was no concept of that being scary. That looked like opportunity, like it was just me trying to figure it out. Never thought of it as scary. So in the early parts of the career, that was getting sales training. For those of you that I'm a big advocate for knowing about how sales actually works. So for me, originally, you'll recall that turned into Tom Hopkins training. And every book I could read about entrepreneurs and understanding that, and being with a Brian Tracy or a Wayne Dyer to learn about the mentality behind it. And that led me to careers in the manufacturing of the glass business, sales and that, then into taking over a packaging company because I was good at sales. People trusted me to take over a company and turn it around. Did some, clearly entrepreneurial turnarounds, saved some companies, made a little bit of money, and then decided to start something that I really had to do because I was so young. I could never ask or tell people to listen to me because of my age and experience. I was 27 or 28, 29 running businesses. I had to use all those teachers, all the Wayne Dyers, all the Brian Tracys, all the Tony Robbins, all the people that I had learned from to do my next job, which was Conscious One, where we started a personal development business. And it was totally based on myself and my partner's greatest books that we loved, the ones that taught us the most. And we turned that into online courses in 2001, 2002, 2004. And many of the people on your call would know me from the Conscious One days, where we interviewed the best-selling authors and put books together along with an online course. And could you believe this? You could chat with the author and ask a question. Wow, that was new groundbreaking idea. So that was kind of the 2000s and the aughts. And then had some great success with that. Also went through the very difficult times when nobody could find any money on their credit card to charge when we went through the Great Recession. Came out of that and looked at the real estate world and said the real estate world in the Destin, Florida area was ready for this kind of thinking, this kind of mentality. And along with my wife, got in the real estate business. And the Martino Group is essentially a real estate concierge service operating in the residential real estate in Northwest Florida.
So let me ask you back to, manufacturing to personal development. I mean, not to be funny, man, but that's a pretty big jump. I mean, manufacturing is about nuts and bolts and things and stuff. And personal development is about the mind and the mindset and getting inside. How did you what was it that propelled you to go from this world to this world, which seems so different?
Well, you know, because you helped me write the book, The Power of You. One of the things that happens as a successful entrepreneur or someone who's just successful in the world, you get really good at one skill. But that one skill for me, it was being a doer, making things happen. It could be literally manufacturing things, but that might be taking a little too literally. For me, it was just doing and making things happen. I had to marry that with the feeling and what was important, and understanding that just doing isn't being that human being that we all talk about. And I needed to understand a little bit more about that feeling side of me, and make sure that I married that with my doer and my thinker. And so in my world, there was enough success that I had a chance to just pause and say, okay, what's missing? What needs to be done? I still need to keep my skills, but I needed to be able to address some of the feeling and the making things really worth it, things deep and meaningful, to have a meaningful, conscious effort on the things that you're doing, and making sure that those things that you are working on and were so avid, actively doing, had meaning in your life. And so that immediately was what, after I had a little bit of success, I started to attach with books and reading and learning and listening, the people that could teach me about the feeling side of Scott Martino and what was important. Those two things, when I started taking the thinking and the doing and marrying it with the feeling, I got that sweet spot that we call the conscious triangle that made all the difference in the world for me. So now all of a sudden I wasn't so adamant about having to do something, to be active all the time. I could be active and have it be meaningful and have it work out, probably with a little less agitation and anxiety and a lot more joy and deep conscious understanding.
It seems as though you're bringing up a very, very important point. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on, I was just literally a few days ago reading this piece that said, based on heavy research, that today people are 16% more sad than they were 20 or 30 years ago. And I'm wondering if you see any correlation between the current human condition and the lack that people have of that space to sit back and say, wait, what's missing? What's needed? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, there is certainly a generation that really follows that YOLO, you only live once, and are not going to do it like their parents did, and work for 20 or 30 years for a company. And clearly that may be because economic conditions aren't going to allow that to happen. Businesses aren't hiring the employee for 20 or 30 years. So I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg in this one, but I clearly know that people are not going to be putting up, and the entrepreneurs on this call, people are not going to be putting up with work conditions that they don't enjoy, or you're certainly not going to get great work out of people if the environment that they're working in isn't, I don't know if joyful would be the word, but certainly productive, meaningful, consciously chosen by them, that they're enjoying it. So that sadness is probably coming from some kind of disconnect. I think an obvious answer would be, of course, because of the pandemic, we all got a little disconnected from seeing each other. But I clearly know that from work like this, you can have the connection, even if we're working remotely. That's just a different form of connecting, and the ability for the entrepreneur, the CEO, and the others to provide that opportunity to have meaningful work is not determined by the physical location. It can be enhanced. It could also be reduced considerably, depending on who you are. But I do think that the happiness comes from, the more sadness comes from the disconnect, whether it's to yourself or to meaningful work.
And what would you say then? So, you made the shift over to Conscious One and to being, frankly, one of the pioneers of personal development in the early 2000s. What was the feeling like for you? Could you go back and look at Scott, 20 years ago and say, Scott 20 years ago versus the Scott 25 or 30 years ago, what was the difference? Because I'd love for people to hear that when you're a doer, charge, versus now I'm consciously thinking about what I'm doing. Compare those two for us so we can get a sense.
Sure. Well, one of the feelings was that time disappeared. that there wasn't a sense of I was on a clock. I was just in a joyful moment when I'm working on those personal development courses with those authors who are so inspiring to me, to have the opportunity to share their words, to consume them myself, to make them part of to curate them in my own self and make them work. That time disappeared. So one of the ways you find that you're in the flow, you're in your passion, you're doing it, is when your concept of time just disappears. You feel like you're completely in the moment. All of your senses are working, your eyes, your ears, your heart, you're all in a line. And the concept of time is just lost because you're so in the flow. That's one of the times where you've got to pay attention and notice that. You should be able to hang with it for quite a while when they do occur, but make sure that you notice it. And that would be one of the things that I have always juxtaposed when I'm really the happiest, when I'm really doing my best work, is those moments when time is of no consequence. It loses its meaning because you're right there, right now, 100%, and there's nothing else going on in the world. You don't even have to pay attention to it.
And so you went through that process. It was, I mean, as the phases of life, and you and I have been around a little while. So we got a few phases that we've gone through, still smiling, looking, feeling good. And then, there was that difficult period during the recession that led to, I'm an entrepreneur, time to reinvent myself again. Here I am living in beautiful Destin, Florida, which is an amazing place. And you have a house on the water. It's gorgeous. I can't wait to come down there again and hang. And so you had to make another shift. And what was that like to sit there in your office and say, this is not working like it was before. I thought we were going to go down this path for a long time. Circumstances made it. Much like for many people, the pandemic made it, that we have to make a pivot. What was that like for you?
Well, one of the things that I am blessed with is the ability to look at the numbers and go, the model that works, the business model that worked in the 2000s for Conscious One and for many, many others of, taking a third of the gross revenue, sharing a third of the gross revenue, and using a third to produce it, just didn't work anymore. It was a new business model that worked fantastically for 4 or 5 years, but then when things got tough, that changed, and you have to be able to recognize it. It's very hard to recognize it at first. Can't remember if it was Twain or Hemingway said that, how do you go bankrupt? Very slowly, then quickly, right at the end. And that's what happens to all businesses. They won't recognize it. All people won't recognize it. There's no not recognizing it. So eventually it gets you. Now, those that have the ability to do other things, that have continued to develop their own skills, personal, professional skills, have some understanding of their own self-esteem, of what that they're probably likely of being very, very successful, as long as they're giving themselves a chance to do so. It was clear by the time we got to 2010 or 2011 that the personal development world had changed considerably. And we weren't in the secret days anymore. We needed to be elsewhere. For me, I looked at the world and said, we were coming out of a recession. What looks like it could be good? And the real estate business, to me, kept popping up as the next big business. And so we did that shift. Now, I will share with you that my skill set is probably pretty well aligned with being able to shift on that. And I've always been very proud of that, but I've also relied on it too. No matter where you go, there you are, and that's worked out just well for me. And that's not braggadocious. It's just the way it is. And I would share with you when I coaching and working with people too, I let them know that their success is inevitable. That you're going to be successful. The question is, how long do you want to take? How painful do you want it to be? How easy do you want it to be? Should we do the right things? Should we make some choices in businesses and environments and with business models that work? Or should we stubbornly continue to ask the world to love me and care for me and honor me, even though I'm doing something that no one values?
And so I think this is kind of fascinating, right? I mean, I know that older entrepreneurs that have been around, had a couple of incarnations of their entrepreneurship, so to speak.
Yeah, hopefully.
Almost always you see what you took from the first one to the second one, what you took from the second one to the third
Yeah.
one. And certainly you're not just a real estate person. You
Right.
are a concierge real estate service that
Yeah.
really helps people in lots and lots of ways. And I'd love if you could explain a little bit about how, the influence of being the doer to being the much more conscious, present person to moving into real estate and taking that doer conscious presence into that influenced you and how it's affecting what you're doing today.
So every real estate transaction is a little business for the acquirer, the buyer, for the seller, for the agents that are involved in it. And for me, it's 80 to 100 times a year being able to have a little business outcome, assess it, and look at the strengths, the weaknesses, do a little SWOT analysis on every single transaction. And in doing so, you have to take in your customers, the buyer or the seller, what they're after. So for me, it's a little play. It's a little business that happens, 60, 70 times a year, which is great for someone with experience, right? I don't have to get totally invested in the outcome. I don't have to force one side or the other to do it. I do have to lay out what I think are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats on each transaction. And that generally works. Now, from the real estate world, it's the number one financial transaction that most people do in their lives, Ridgely. It is by far, if you want to watch an emotional curve, by far it is the most difficult thing that people have to agree to do. Once they agree, it's fantastic. However, the emotional trauma that comes out during that kind of a risk, when you're risking that much of your financial future, comes out. And there are a lot of childhood trauma stuff that comes out during these transactions that my skill set gets to know that that's from someplace else, not because of the transaction. And to be able to talk with someone calmly and understandingly about it is probably one of the greater joys that I get in my transactions, that I can tell that someone's completely off the charts, uncomfortable, and I can ask about it. Most agents would run from that in any way, shape, or form because they'd have no, internal skill to be able to do it. But my ability to understand a balance sheet, an income statement from all my other careers comes due every single time in both the preparation for buying or selling a property and consummating at the closing transaction. That's that score sheet. And I'm pretty comfortable with the score sheets, right? Because we've already looked at it beforehand and used the skill sets that I learned in my 20s and 30s to be able to assess the value of a transaction. The real fun about real estate is you get to watch the scoreboard, and they win, and they win again and win again. And now, long enough in this, we're doing it for 2 or 3 times with people. We're talking about creating millions of dollars of wealth, which was something that was appropriate that we got to do a little bit in Conscious One, but we didn't get a chance to see this kind of financial, just unbelievable success for people. And that brings real joy.
So give me one instance of where you really had a challenging situation where you had to, talk somebody off a cliff or something that was really difficult and challenging. And how did you handle it? And what did you take away from that?
So I would just say in the last 90 days, one of the things that happens is when we have real estate people that are involved in transactions, and they know the most, they know exactly, everything there is to know about it. And sometimes in the business, we will miss things. So I had a transaction where there was a sale of a property, 1031 exchange, not to get too technical, but someone's selling their property and rolling it over into taxes, rolling it over to buy another property to defer the taxes, not avoid taxes, defer them. And in this situation, it was a real estate person who knew a little bit of what to do, but was outside the time frame, or was going to be outside the time frame, was going to not wanting to pay the market rate, was just going to do a lot of temper tantrums. And we, as the seller of a property, didn't care. There were many people, jostling for the property. So it was 6 months ago, not 90 days ago. And you have to walk through the person that's a real estate person on the other side, who was the buyer. I had to walk through her how it was going to perform and show literally each month her payment, each month the rental income, each month the appreciation of the property, and use a spreadsheet literally to, and that's the thinker part, right?
Mhm.
And the thinker part, I had to show that to her as the buyer representing the seller so that she could see how 6 months, 1 year, 4 years, this transaction should play out. So there's the thinker sharing information so that she could then go home and process it with feelings, process, she's going to process because she's got to get comfortable with it because she wasn't thinking this was going to come through because of some of the time frames that were involved with the 1031 exchange. But using my analytical, the thinking part, sharing that with her, let her go home and go, okay, this is going to work. But without that ability to do a calculator and put it on a spreadsheet and share it, that was not going to happen. She would have freaked and lost it because of the emotion part of it, not knowing. And so sometimes in the case, the thinker provided the clarity.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's something that entrepreneurs wrestle with all the time. And it'd be great to hear your take on what they can do to really reconcile those things. They have a tendency to either ignore the feeling side and try to power through it,
Right.
they ignore the number side and try to rely on that feeling. And then either case, it's a mess. So what can the budding entrepreneur put in their brain to say, okay, peeps, we really need to pay attention to A, how we feel about it, and B, the numbers?
Yeah. So it's a great question. I will share for everyone that when you're in your zone, let's say whatever business that you're in, that you're working on right now, and you're listening to this, and you know that this makes sense, whatever it is that you're trying to do, that makes sense for your client, makes sense for your company, and there's some kind of feedback that's out of left field, take a step back. Forget that you're the smartest person in the room on this subject, and you are probably right. Someone is giving you some dissonant, it's a cognitive dissonance. They can't see it. It's not because you're not good. It's probably not because you didn't offer it. It's literally they don't understand it. In this case, this person was in a real estate business and she didn't understand the numbers. So we had to go back and show the numbers and let that play out. And I would share anytime you're in one of those situations where it's making perfect sense for everyone, and for some reason you're still getting negative feedback, as in we're not moving forward, or generally you get some kind of feedback that's off the charts wrong, like it's off the wall kind of feeling coming back to you. When that is occurring, take a step back and regroup and go through your checklist of what needs to be done. And you'd asked earlier when we were prepping, books and other things. If there was a book that I think makes a huge difference in people's life, make sure you catch The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. I may not have the last name right, but The Goal is it. And the reason I want you to read it is because they do a tremendously good job of making sure you understand the business numbers and still making the decision based on your feelings and thoughts about how to move forward. And he goes through a story. There's a bunch of good stories in there for every entrepreneur. Our jobs is to be nowadays, to use some language from the book, is to be a Jonah to all the other entrepreneurs who've come along the way, or to be a Jonah's, teach people that concept of understanding both the business and profitability and your excitement about what's going to happen can all come together in a perfect spot. That's one of the books that I think made a key difference in me being able to understand the manufacturing side as well as the entrepreneurial side of deciding how and when to move forward with a project or a new idea or a new product.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. It's been a really long time since I read that book. It's probably worth a revisit. Sometimes those good ones, you got to kind of go back and go, oh man, let me read it again. See
There's
how
still
it resonates
Herbies.
today.
There's still Herbies. Remember, Herbie was the slower Boy Scout that they had to put in front of the line. So every one of our businesses have Herbies, choke points, and they just move around, and they move around even more mysteriously now with the online world. But you certainly can identify. If you want to watch someone who's still practicing The Goal, watch Elon Musk talk about him working in the Tesla plant. He was out there finding all the Herbies, finding all the choke points for the electric vehicle production line. It literally was sleeping on the floor, finding Herbies all day long. And he tells the story about finding one, special weld that was going on that was stopping, $50 million a day of production. and no one knew why the weld was taking place in the production line. Nobody in the company knew why it just had always had been. It was the great Herbie that they took out and continued on. So Herbie's choke points in businesses are still alive and well. Our job as entrepreneurs is to find those and make sure that the business is supported in a way that we never ever get our businesses get killed by Herbies.
So while we're on that topic, what would two others? So you got to get one is the goal. What would two other books that you would recommend to the budding entrepreneur if you were to pick? And by the way, not your own.
I'm going to go back a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to go back a little bit.
Okay.
I would do the Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, and I would have everyone read that because it's about the road that an entrepreneur takes on. Talks a little bit. I think M. Scott, with a little bit of a Buddhist, he talks a little bit about the first line is life is a struggle, and he begins, and there's a lot of case studies on it. The reason I would recommend that for anybody is that it's good self-reflection, and it lets you know that those of us who've chosen the road less traveled do so for a reason. And there's only a few of us that choose that. And there's some common themes and common ideas that are needed for that. What are you doing? You're going grabbing the book off the wall there?
I am grabbing the book off the wall. That's exactly what I am doing. So keep
right. Right. He's got it. So the reason I loved it was because I love the case studies, and I would diagnose the case studies as I was reading them originally, and then they would and then of course you would reveal the case studies, and I was always right. So it was a great revelation to me. Scott Peck died a few years ago, but he was a prolific writer in anything that he put together. But Road Less Traveled is his.
And then what would be the third one? What was the third one you recommend?
Well, I'm going to go way out there. This is going to go a little bit more personal on there. I would have someone read The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. If you're an entrepreneur and you need to have a Bible, I want you to pick up something by Ayn Rand. So it'd be Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead. And I need you to read it because every entrepreneur in the Atlas Shrugged, there's 47 pages on defending why money is important to entrepreneurs and capitalists. And my greatest gift to everybody that listens to this would be to get really comfortable with those 47 pages of why the tool of money is an incredibly valuable tool for us as entrepreneurs. It's a way for us to trade and exchange our value. And everyone needs to know the underpinnings of that thinking, that why it's important, and why it's such a singular, it's being attacked in so many different ways. And as entrepreneurs, I need everyone that follows the road less traveled to have that same understanding of why it is such a critical component.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because that's super fascinating. Okay. I mean, that's like really great. That's like super juicy, meaty stuff. So give us the, according to Scott Martino, why money is so important version.
So the short version is, I apologize for everyone that the books are 1,200 pages each. Okay. So but I don't apologize because they're worth it. You're going to be a changed person on it. Men and women, all peoples of the world have to have the ability to exchange the value of their diverse skill sets. The person that makes a window needs to be able to exchange it for value with someone who makes a roof. And the person who makes a roof needs to be exchange it with someone who makes the value of a road. And the person who makes a road needs to be able to exchange it for the value of the person that needs a ring to give to his wife. Take every exchange, and there has to be some method, some meaningfulness other than bartering for that to occur. So the great ideas, the great concepts, the great moving forward always is buttressed by the means of exchange that is defined by the use of money. Let's use the dollar as an example. You can use other currencies if you want. You could use Bitcoin if you'd like. uh, even in today's uncertain issues. We are, I think Bitcoin confirms the need for a value of exchange, more a store of value more than anything. However, there has been, because of the difference between those that are successful and those that struggle with success, there has been a tremendous effort to try and demonize those that are good at exchanging value, exchanging money, trading that. And I want to make sure that I give everyone a chance. No one does it better than Ayn Rand in those 47 pages where Francisco is telling everyone about why the value of money, so we can get rid of the old nose in the camel tent thing, the concept of money is bad in God's eyes. All those things go out the door with the logic that they talk about. And I apologize for the 47 pages you'll have to read about money, but you'll be a better person because of it.
Yeah, and I'm such a huge believer in that. At the end of the day, it's just energy. It's floating around.
Currency.
It's just currency.
Currency, right?
It's energy, and it's such a valuable exercise to go through. So if you were to pick the one or two characteristics most needed to be successful as an entrepreneur, what would they be in your mind?
Optimism, an orientation towards the sun is going to rise, we're going to be okay, that your success is inevitable. And the real concept, you have to eliminate worry from any part of your world as much as you possibly can. Worry has to be eliminated. It is of zero value. It is either a projection into the future or a review of the past, of which neither are in play today. If I could do those two things and implant everyone that's on the call with just a little bit more optimism and an understanding that your success is inevitable, and remove any part of the worry that has no value, it is absolutely negative. You can take worry and put shame and guilt and all those other negative emotions. If you want to read more about that, you do Power versus Force, and you'll see how those things all just reduce you. But take the optimism and eliminate the worry, and then just watch what happens. You're going to be unbelievably successful.
How do you respond to one of the great quotes from Jim Rohn that I really have always taken to heart, which is, how long should you keep trying? And the answer by Jim is until.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's we are just a little older. I still feel 35 and still feel, ready to go at it with any new ideas and any new concepts, and love to, I literally love to spend my time that disappears when I'm talking about these kinds of ideas. But the answer is, you never, ever stop trying and to grow. Not to get too philosophical about it, but the idea you have to keep growing, because otherwise you're just going with comfort. And comfort's fine. We all need rest days. We all need days in the meadow. We all need chances with the sun. We need to take vacations and enjoy ourselves. But too much comfort can, for too long, I think starts to kill a little bit of the soul. I do believe that we want to keep being human beings, but I think we want to keep chasing that next rainbow, that wonderful sunset, that beautiful connection with people, the next great idea that inspires me. Those are all concepts that I think will cause you to have to grow. That growth will cause discomfort as you pursue it, but that discomfort and growth, that risk and reward, the risk and reward is kind of, that's the worthy life. That is the worthy life. I'm not comfortable staying comfortable all the time. I want to be a little challenged by books, by ideas, by good friends who say, have you thought of this? By podcasts, by new ideas that you get it in the 3 a.m. when you're trying to solve something. That jazzes me. That's the part that makes me feel fun and happy to be able to discuss the kind of ideas and concepts, and being around people that that's their orientation. I'm signing up for that.
Awesome. Tangential question, because you've touched on it a lot of times already in this conversation, but I'd love to address directly. What do you feel about the power of mentors and finding mentors to move yourself forward?
Well, greatest growth I've had is getting coached and being coached, both ways. Being a mentor and being mentored is where all of the great leaps forward have occurred for me. And it's usually just a small time in between them. I'm always looking for those that have gone down the path, and I want to know that their success leaves a trail, and I'm going to follow that trail and then follow another one. And I will share with you that if you're not being coached or mentored in some way, you're missing out on the opportunity for real growth. You need to have some feedback. You got to have some feedback. You got to have somebody who's championing you and saying, I know you're going through a tough time right now, but you're on the right path and you're doing the right things. And you have to have someone that says, what the fuck are you thinking? You know, you got to have that, excuse my language, but you got to have someone that says, hey, that just does not work in any way, situation or form. And entrepreneurs can make those mistakes. We can get a little full of ourselves. You do have to have someone to just check you a little bit. But mostly I would say just to be able to share what you're thinking, download, get some feedback, a little bit of accountability. That's the greatest growth. And that discomfort of having to do it is the exact reason you should do it. Right? You know that.
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurs have poor memories and an underdeveloped sense of fear.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes. Right.
So,
right.
Final words from Scott Martino to the world, little nugget that you like to leave for the budding entrepreneurs or those who are reinventing themselves. What would you want to share based on your experience for them?
Well, ask yourself this question. This was passed along to me by the great teacher and speaker on Ayn Rand, Nathaniel Brandon, who was one of our people at Conscious One. He asked, what needs to be done? That's the first question. What needs to be done? It's a very simple question, simple declarative statement. What needs to be done? And then get busy. That if you ask yourself that each day, and of course you've set yourself up some major goals that you're wanting to do, whether that's growth in terms of sales numbers or amount of people, whatever that is, today, what needs to be done? If you live your life with that question in mind every single day, what needs to be done, you'll be just fine. Don't worry about whether or not you'll be successful. Your success is inevitable, especially if you start with what needs to be done.
I love that. What needs to be done from Scott Martino, and then get busy. Scott, thank you so much for your time on behalf of the Groove community and the community of entrepreneurs at large. Deeply appreciate your wisdom and insights. Thank you, my brother. You are very much appreciated.
Right back at you, bud. Anytime. And love your people. Love anybody who listens to this. Make sure they know how to reach out to me if I can be of any help.
For sure. Will do, for sure. All right. Thanks a lot.